them. And after this reset, they are running a series of communication tests with the launch vehicle. So to check that this communication, which was at stake, is now normal. So we know the launch vehicle has been reset. Now it's the range system which is being reset. And after the test, we hope we will be in a position to resume the countdown before the end of the window.
Now we're looking again at the images of the boosters, which is what we were talking about. This is the last one of the 44P series. Let's just chat for a little bit while we're waiting for a little bit more information about the next phase, because of course we only have 10 Ariane 4s left.
You mean the next phase of the...
tous les moyens se tiennent prêts pour une reprise du décompte dans quelques minutes.
Okay, we just had the information now from the DDO that everybody should be on the technical side, of course, but for us too, ready to get back to the green restart of the sequence in a few minutes. So that's about the time we have before we actually will take back again the lead to the liftoff.
So that means that the chances are we're going to be resetting. What are the procedures required in order for that to happen?
Well, you know, all these systems have got extensive definition and in operation, and also in setting up and setting down the system. So we have to, resetting is not just putting off and switching back on. There is a certain number of tests that have to be performed, and that's what's going on now. But it's a matter of minutes, as the DDO said.
We're looking here at people from Eutelsat and from Alcatel. We've just had a little bit more information. It looks like we will be starting again soon.
Yeah, we should be starting again soon. Probably the director of operation has been checking again that the meteorological conditions are still green, because of course we've slipped in the windows, and obviously when we started.
Well, we've just seen the status panels go back to green, which of course is a very good sign.
Okay, so now we should have in a very short time, I think, the start again of the automatic sequence.
Retour au vert de la sauvegarde. Le décompte va démarrer à 23h11 temps universel.
So there we had the announcement that the countdown is going to start again at 23 and 11 minutes.
That is in 5 minutes from now. And that's probably to take into account all the systems that have to be in a good position, including the launch vehicle, which has been on the waiting phase so far. So instead of just reaching the -6 minute stage, so everybody checks its own systems to make sure that at the -6 minutes the countdown can resume without having any halt. And in particular, I was just talking about the weather situation. You know, the weather situation was green throughout the window, but now when we are starting a new sequence, we wanted to have a confirmation of this status, which is the case because the meteor sign is still green.
Now, what conditions would actually cause a red in the status panels in terms of the
tous
weather?
DDO, le démarrage du décompte est repoussé de quelques minutes.
Now, what did we just hear there? Could you translate that for us, Jean-Marc?
Excuse me, Katie.
What did we just hear there from the Director of Operations?
Well, the Director of Operation just mentioned that there is another slight delay of a few minutes, and as I was telling you, the launch vehicle and everybody's trying to be ready for -6 minutes. And apparently the launch vehicle or the launch pad needed a little bit more time to be ready.
Tous DDO, le décompte
we were
reprendra
discussing
dès que le retour au vert de l'ensemble de lancement sera confirmé.
Okay, so now the announcement was that the countdown will resume as soon as the launch pad status will revert back to green. And as I told you, they are setting up to be ready for the -6.
Now, we were just discussing the weather, which is actually still green at this point in time. And what sort of wind speeds would be capable of actually preventing a launch?
Well, the wind speeds that could be detrimental to the launch vehicle at the launch pad would be above 9 meters per second in an average range over 10 minutes, which means gusts of winds of up to 14 meters per second, and we are far from this tonight.
Now, what about the winds on the ground? Why is it so crucial to monitor those?
It is crucial to withstand efforts. You see the structure of a launch vehicle like this, which is very high. It is not fragile, it's sturdy, but it is bound to face effort front-wise. And side winds can be withstood by the launch vehicle, but up to certain limits. And that is why these limits have been set to 9 meters per second average speed. But
also, I mean, when you're monitoring winds on the ground, you're also monitoring for safety.
At the ground level, its safety is not exactly at stake because the whole area is evacuated. The safety concern will be more for altitude winds or winds at the beach of Kourou, and that would be to prevent, in case of launch vehicle destruction, that any damage on the Kourou population or goods.
Le décompte reprendra à 23h15 temps universel.
So now the launch pad installation has gone back to green, and to get the final system set up, don't forget there is also a spacecraft there. Everybody has to be ready to get together from the -6 minute onwards to the liftoff time. So the timing that was given for this new liftoff time, start of the sequence, will be 23 hours and 15 minutes universal time. That is in 5 minutes from now.
And of course, everybody's working very closely together. People who've worked on the spacecraft, people who are on the ground here in mission control, and throughout the range operations.
Yes, this kind of situation requires, of course, competence from technical teams to analyze quickly the matter, but they also require some calm and taking the time to properly analyze and make the decision.
Attention pour le début de la séquence synchronisée.
And there we
8, 7,
Here we go
6,
to the
5,
new countdown.
4, 3, 2, unité, top, reprise des comptes.
There we go. We've restarted the synchronized sequence, which lasts 6 minutes.
Yes.
So we're now 5 minutes and 50
Nouveau
seconds to launch.
23h21
and we are heading now for a new H0 time at 23 hours and 21 minutes universal time. So we're in the synchronized sequence now. We have, as we were saying before, reset both the range system, the launch vehicle system. The orders have been exchanged and found correct, and that's where we could resume the countdown. So now...
So we were just discussing earlier what the main events are during this synchronized sequence. This is the sequence, of course, just to remind those who are not sure, during which time the onboard computers take charge of the checks.
Yes, I mentioned earlier some final actions with the fluids, with the pressurization of these fluids at the flight pressure, with the onboard computer getting orders and the new time.
And what we're actually seeing here is what happened a number of hours ago now, and this is the withdrawal of the gantry. Now, the gantry is the structure that you can see there that actually protects the launch vehicle while it's being prepared on the launch site. It's a bit of a beast. It's 3,000 tons of steel, and that's now being moved away. We can see the launch vehicle attached to the umbilical tower.
Okay, and this is the purpose is to allow the cryogenic filling out of the tower, and of course to clear the way for the future liftoff with the gantry at a good 50 meters distance from there.
Now, the third stage is filled through the arms on the umbilical tower with cryogenic fuel, Jean-Marc, which is, of course, liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. Now, that's a complex process because they're kept at such low temperatures.
Yeah, and that requires topping until very far in the countdown, and this will be closed somewhere down this synchronized sequence, and after final pressurization, these feeding plates that you will see on either side of the launch vehicle will be closed. So here you see the arms that we are talking about.
There's the arms, and the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen have to be kept apart. Obviously, clearly, we're talking about temperatures which are extremely low. Can you tell us the temperatures?
Well, the liquid hydrogen has a temperature of minus 252 degrees Celsius. They are here fed by the arms on the right side of the picture, and the liquid oxygen minus 190 degrees.
Now, the cryogenic fuel was put in to the vehicle several hours ago, but we're still topping up right until the last minute via those arms.
Yes, and after we have maintained that, then we will have the perfect condition of filling and pressurization, and we'll be able to release the arms for the launch vehicle to go.
Now, we were talking a little earlier as well about the anatomy of the launch vehicle, Ariane 4, the last and 15th 44P. Of course, there are other configurations. P means powder, which means that we're talking about solid fuel boosters. The height of Ariane 4 is 56 meters, and it weighs 335 tons. The spacecraft itself is 3,150 kilos. Now, this flight is lasting 20 minutes or so, and at the end of that, the spacecraft will be representing, in fact, 1% of the mass of the total when it's finally orbited. Now, let's talk a little bit about the perigee. We're actually hoping to launch the spacecraft higher than usual. Why is that?
Well, we have tonight a 44P version Ariane launch vehicle, which has a capacity to launch up to 3.5 tons roughly, and we have here only 3.15 tons. It means we have some extra performance, and we're gonna give it to the client, if so to speak, by sending him to a higher perigee than usual, that is 300 kilometers instead of 200 as usual.
À tous de l'EDO, attention pour H-1 minute.
So the DDO is now announcing the minus
Top, moins 1 minute et des comptes.
So we're now 1 minute to lift off. And there is Ariane 4 on the launch pad waiting to go. The first thing that we'll see will be the arms moving away from the launch vehicle.
Okay, this will take place at minus 5 seconds, just before there will be the onboard computer taking over the sequence of ignition, and after ignition, at 4 seconds after ignition, the hook that maintained the launch vehicle on the table will be open to release the launch to the upper trajectory.
And of course there will be a few seconds between the initial burn and the actual liftoff
of the boosters.
À tous de DDO. Attention pour le décompte final.
So let's sit back now and
10,
watch the
9,
final countdown.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, unité, feu. Allumage. Décollage. Les paramètres à bord sont nominaux. Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux. Extinction des propulseurs d'appoint à poudre.
And there we have it, a very clear night so that we can see the launch vehicle climbing into the sky. We've just heard that the boosters have been extinguished. We'll wait another few seconds before we actually see those being jettisoned. Why do we extinguish them 30 seconds before the jettisoning?
Well, as a matter of fact, they're extinguished when they're burned out. Each of them, they're 9.5 tons of propellant. But we keep them with the launch vehicle a little bit longer to avoid them from falling on too near the installations. In fact, they fall a few kilometers away from the launch pad.
Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux, la trajectoire est normale.
We're hearing that everything
Les
is
papes viennent
normal.
d'être larguées.
And the boosters have just fallen away. You may well have seen that on your screen. And as we said, those are 4 solid boosters with
Passage du mur du son,
weight.
tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
Sound barrier has been broken, and which means we're past the sound speed.
We have, and as I was saying, the boosters are 240 in weight, and we're carrying 9.5 tons of solid fuel each. We're now being powered by the first stage.
Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
Everything is normal. We're being powered by the first stage, which was actually ignited on the ground. We have 4 Viking engines burning a ton of fuel per second. That's a hell of a lot of fuel per second.
Yeah, that's for the 4 engines altogether, and it will burn for another total 3.5 minutes, and so that means another 2 minutes from now. Taking, in fact, the launch vehicle out of the dense layers of the atmosphere up to about 60 kilometers altitude. That's the main task of this first stage, to get away from this high friction and in the atmosphere. And you can see that the speed is increasing. We are now up to 1.2 kilometers per second, which means roughly 4,000 kilometers per hour already.
Well faster than the speed of a speeding bullet. Let's just have a little think about this and compare the launch vehicle to a Boeing 747. It has the same mass at liftoff, but it takes 8 hours for the 747 to cross the Atlantic, and it takes the launch vehicle 20 minutes, at the end of which, as we said, only 1% of its mass is actually there in orbit. And interestingly, they cost about the same.
And if you look at the power, you will find that one single of this 4 Viking engine is thrusting as much as the 4 engines of the 747.
There's some interesting facts there.
So everything looks normal. The launch vehicle.
We've just heard that the first stage has burnt out, and separation of the first stage is taking place.
And ignition of the second stage. So everything is normal. The trajectory, combustion. Okay, so propulsion is correct. So now we're in the second stage burning.
Which has 1 Viking engine, 80-ton thrust. Again, that's a hell of a thrust. Now, this burns for about 2 minutes, and we'll be burning 33 tons of propellant.
Well, that's right, and this purpose of this stage is, in fact, we're now already in the outer space, but it is to give a speed increment, a speed increase of 2.7 kilometers. So it means nearly 10,000 kilometers per hour more to the launch vehicle. That's the job of this second stage.
We're heading towards the removal now, jettisoning of the fairing, and let me remind you that the fairing is the protective outside at the very tip of the launch vehicle. We've just heard that it has now been jettisoned, and this means that the spacecraft is completely open to the elements. But of course we've now hauled ourselves outside gravity. We're outside. Everything is nominal, everything is normal. We're now outside the dense atmosphere. And there we see the spacecraft open to the elements.
Well, the decision the order to get rid of, to release this fairing is made when the friction is low enough on what's left of this very light atmosphere, what's left of it, to prevent any friction on the spacecraft. And also, we jettison, of course, this dead weight of about 750 kilos to enhance the acceleration of and reaching the final orbit with the thrust that we have now.
Now we're coming up to the extinction of the second stage.
Extinction du deuxième étage.
There we go. We've just had second stage
Séparation du
extinction.
deuxième étage.
Separation of the second stage.
Allumage du troisième étage.
Ignition of the third stage has taken place. Can you describe what we're actually
Tous les
seeing now?
paramètres bord sont normaux et la trajectoire est normale.
The animation here shows you the operation we've just been hearing about. That is extinction, separation, and then ignition of the third stage.
Now, the third stage on Ariane 4 is cryogenic, which means that it's liquid fuel. And of course, as we were mentioning earlier, that it is actually a very complex process filling the third stage with the cryogenic fuel at such low temperatures, 252 below for hydrogen and 190 below for oxygen.
Yes, and the purpose of this third stage now, which is going to...
Acquisition du lanceur par la télémesure de Natal au Brésil.
Yes, so the satellite has been, the launch vehicle has been acquired by Natal ground station. We're going to go to the ground station subject in a few minutes. So the third stage is going to take the spacecraft to the injection point after over 12 minutes propulsion. And during all this time, even though the thrust is slow, the speed increment will reach up till around past 8 kilometers per second.
Okay, we as we said, we've now had the acquisition of signal at Natal. Natal is the ground station on the east coast.
Sont stables et normaux. La trajectoire est normale.
On the east coast of Brazil, all the parameters are nominal at this point, and the trajectory is also nominal. The ground stations are dotted. There's one in Natal. There is then, of course,
Ascension Island in the middle of the Atlantic, and Libreville on the African coast, to look out the last events of the flight, that is the extinction of the third stage and the separation of the spacecraft.
We're going to take a little look now at pollution control here in French Guiana.
Clean water. It's everyone's concern. In French Guiana, we have ways to measure the impact of every Ariane launch on our lakes and rivers. These analyses are carried out by outside experts not affiliated with the CSG. The area around the CSG remains probably the most protected and most virgin wilderness in all of French Guiana, and the Environment Ministry also comes down to make regular checks on the fish and game. What kind of fish have you got here, and what are you going to do with it?
C'est un carnassier, c'est un Nauplias malabaricus.
Tous les paramètres bord
It is
sont
the main
normaux.
predator
La
in these
trajectoire
rivers.
est normale.
We're going to analyze it to measure the amount of mercury, among other things, also the amount of aluminium in its flesh. This is another predator.
Encore un autre prédateur.
It's an
Donc
adult.
celui-ci est à la taille
You can
adulte.
see
On
its
voit
teeth.
les dents qu'il a. Et
Its name
d'ailleurs,
is
son nom,
dog teeth,
c'est
since it
dent
has
chien,
teeth that
parce
look
qu'il a des
like a
dents qui
dog's.
ressemblent à un chien. Nous venons
We
pour
come
le
from the
ministère de l'Environnement
Environment
faire un
Ministry
inventaire.
and do an inventory
Donc
once
là,
a
ça va
year.
être une seule
For
fois.
the
Sinon,
Space
pour le
Center,
centre spatial,
we come
nous
twice a
venons 2
year.
fois par an.
Et vous faites quoi? And now what do you do with the fish? You take them and you analyze them in your laboratories here?
Oui, nous
Yes,
avons
we
un
have a laboratory at
Petit
Petit Saut, where we carry out our different analysis. We also study the fish population to see if it has changed at all after each launch. We have a laboratory where we can carry out all the types of analysis we need. This is a carp. It's a herbivore. It's the main source of food for the predatory fish we saw before. It's one of the lowest fish in the food chain, so it absorbs the least possible toxins.
Philippe, you've known these rivers and creeks for 12 years now. How would you rate the water quality?
The water quality here in French Guiana is good. I'd even say very good. But it is true, we are far from all forms of industrial pollution, as opposed to what you find in Europe. In my view, Ariane 5 does not pollute at all, nor does Ariane 4. What is starting to pollute our waters is the mercury from the clandestine gold mining. The more smoke there is, the more people think it pollutes. But it is true that all the smoke drifts off very far from here and is dispersed. So it remains minor compared with industries we might find in Europe or in the US, which pollute the water constantly.
And that's pollution control here in French Guiana. Now, Jean-Marc, we have 10 Ariane 4s to be launched. But after that, of course, Ariane 5 will be taking on the baton. But what about our Ariane 5 after the failure of Flight 142 to put its spacecraft into correct orbit?
Well, further to the inquiry board recommendations, we are implementing different actions to overcome the combustion instability problem that was experienced. And as such, we're in the process of reshaping a dynamic model for combustion. That's one side. But we also have started running a series of tests. More than 70 tests have been performed on a test facility in Europe to try and get towards a softer ignition sequence. We are presently in the process of modifying this test bench in order to make it even more representative of the flight conditions, so that we can hope that around the next month we would be in a position to get to a finalized and qualified sequence of ignition. And if that is so, we should be in a position to resume Ariane 5 flights early 2002, beginning of next year.
So there are a lot of exciting developments, one of which, of course, is that there are plans to put a cryogenic third stage on top of Ariane 5. Now, what would be the advantages of that?
Well, using the cryogenic couple of propulsion, liquid oxygen and nitrogen, on the third stage will give us the best performance with a light weight for propulsion. It means that it will make it possible for Ariane 5 to go from 6 tons to 9 tons into GT orbit, and therefore to continue with the dual launches of these heavy satellites.
Now, we've just heard that we've had acquisition of signal over Ascension Island, which is in the middle of the Atlantic. Let's talk as well about other developments, the building of the new S5 complex. Now, you, of course, have been heavily involved in the building of the ground facilities, so this is something you know a lot about. Tell us about that.
Well, this new payload facility that gets along with Ariane 5 has been built over the past 2 years and was commissioned earlier this summer in July. It comprises 2 clean halls and 2 filling halls. Altogether, this can host up to 4 customers at a time and is an ideal installation, quite modern, for running dual campaigns one after the other. Together with the existing capacity, it doubles our capacity of processing spacecraft here at Kourou, but it also copes with a heavier, larger payload, including this new payload like the automatic transfer vehicle that will reach the International Space Station from the European Space Agency. That's the main facts about this new building.
I mean, are there any other advantages that it's going to be bringing clients? Are there any other advantages that it'll be bringing clients?
Okay, sorry. Of course there are.
Your English is excellent.
Of course there are. We've been taking care of upgrading communication system, of increasing accessibility to the site, of having with a compact design all the features to optimize organization and shorten operations.
Okay, well, let's take a little look now at our satellite.
It's a busy world, and Eutelsat understands the importance of staying connected. Today, as a leader in global satellite communications, Eutelsat is providing new market opening opportunities from the Americas to Europe and beyond with Atlantic Gate. A significant expansion of Atlantic Gate's capacity is now underway with the addition of its newest star, Atlantic Bird 2. For the Internet, Atlantic Bird 2 allows content and service providers to avoid Internet backbone congestion, extending their reach and bypassing local loop difficulties. Two-way rooftop-to-rooftop communications between North America and the continents of Europe and South America become a reality with the new Eutelsat satellite. And as the bandwidth requirements for corporate communications networks continues to increase, Atlantic Bird 2 will be there to answer the needs of business. Atlantic Bird 2 has exceptional operating flexibility. It makes high-power, single-hop communications a reality from the Americas to continental Europe, North Africa and the Middle East, reaching as far as Ankara and the Persian Gulf. Atlantic Bird 2 also enables the European continent to reach corporate and consumer audiences in the Americas. Direct access service within Europe is handled by Atlantic Bird 2's high-power beam that is centered over Western and Central Europe. It provides video, multimedia, internet, corporate data networks, and satellite news gathering through small antennas. The fixed Americas beam on Atlantic Bird 2 speeds up transatlantic traffic and provides for intra-American links. Regional communications within South America are provided through a steerable high-power spot beam centered over Brazil. Video, corporate data, and internet services all will be carried by this link, enabling much smaller antennas to be used in South America. Atlantic Bird 2 and the Atlantic Bird 1 satellite that will follow in early 2002 are part of Eutelsat's objective to expand into new geographic markets where high bandwidth demands exist. Atlantic Bird and Eutelsat, connecting the world via satellite.
And there you have it, Eutelsat expanding markets there in the United States. It actually has 18 satellites in orbit at the present time. And they were looking at Guy Buhl, who's from Alcatel. Interestingly, just to let you know that trajectory and all parameters are nominal at the present time during the flight. Alcatel actually managed to build AB2 in 19 months, which really is truly a record for the company. It's exceptionally fast. And Guy Buhl, who we just saw just now, is the program manager and has credited not only his well-motivated team for the work, but also the excellent relations between Alcatel and the Eutelsat team.
Well, looking back at the panels, we are within the last minute of propulsion of this third stage and all the propulsion system is correct, and we have just been getting the acquisition of the telemetry from the Libreville downrange station in Gabon. And which means that both the station, Ascension Island and Libreville, will be witnessing the last two main events, which mean the extinction of the third stage and later on the separation of the spacecraft. So we have past the lower point, getting some acceleration, and you see now we are over 9.5 kilometers per second, which is a speed that reaches over 30,000 kilometers per hour.
It's unimaginable, basically, for us here on the ground. Now we're heading very, very quickly towards extinction.
Extinction du troisième étage.
And there we have it, the third stage has been extinguished.
Okay, so now we're getting into the...
We're coming up to the separation of the spacecraft, indeed.
Yes, and during that phase we will get the satellite together with, of course, the third stage that has been extinguished in the vehicle equipment bay, oriented in the proper direction, then spinned to the proper speed, and all this before separation.
So effectively we're getting ready to...
After separation, we will have, of course, a very quick acquisition of the spacecraft by Archbishop Station in South Africa and Nangara Station in Australia. This is between 4 and 18 minutes after separation that this will be performed.
Début de mise en rotation.
So what we're hearing now is the beginning of the rotation.
Séparation Atlantic Bird 2.
Spacecraft has been separated.
We have separation.
These are Chios and Klaus and this.
Fin de la déspine du troisième étage.
There we have Eutelsat and Alcatel shaking hands warmly.
With the mission directors.
Right, so what's happening to the satellite now?
Well, the satellite now is going to be, as I said, acquired in a few minutes by the station to make sure it is in a good health. And then in about 3 hours from now, it will partially deploy its solar array. And as soon as tomorrow, the first apogee motor firing will be done to start circularization of the orbit, which will take place in 4 apogee motor firing within the coming weeks. So that in about a week from now, the spacecraft should be totally deployed in orbit at 36,000 kilometers over the planet.
And what happens to the third stage?
Well, the third stage will be passivated. That means it will be outgassed from whatever is left of the former propellants. And using those gases, it will be, as a propulsion mode, it will be set off the trajectory it had so far so that it would not interfere in any way whatsoever with the spacecraft's orbit.
Well, we're looking at some very pleased faces. We're going to take a little look in a second at the replay of the launch.
Let's enjoy this.
Spectacular as it was.
À l'image. Décollage. Les paramètres à bord sont nominaux.
Well, we're going to hopefully be hearing soon from the directors. That was the launch, which was very beautiful. It's been a hectic half an hour, but we have placed the spacecraft into geotransfer orbit, and here we have Monsieur Luton.
Ça fonctionne? Oui. Chers amis de Telsat, c'est vrai que nous avons failli attendre.
Music, when combined with a pleasurable idea, is poetry.